Shabbat Shalom again. Welcome to hold on to your prayer books, but I'm going to talk for a couple minutes so you can make yourself comfortable. Received an email this week that began, Ryan, hi there. It's Queen Esther. A coincidence, really, because as some of you saw on Facebook, I had just come from reading a Purim story to a group of preschoolers. Her email continued. In celebration of Purim, many Jewish people honor my story with colorful costumes and joyful gatherings. But my saving of my community wasn't a party at all. I had to overcome fear. I had to find strength. I couldn't sit by and watch as an unjust plot unfolded. Okay, so the email wasn't really from Queen Esther. Rather, it was an aptly timed solicitation from American Jewish World Service encouraging me to help support their current justice work happening today. In its message, AJWS lifted up an important theme of the Purim story embodied by Queen Esther, one that permeates our tradition. Each of us has the power to make great change in the world, and the time to do it is now. This message is countercultural, as first, too often we perceive strength in numbers, assuming more is always better. I often think of a teaching by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory in his commentary to the very beginning of the book of Numbers. Rabbi Sacks argues there's a tendency to focus on the total, the crowd, the multitude, the mass. Here is a nation of 60 million people, or a company of 100,000 employees, or a sports crowd of 60,000. The larger the total, the stronger the army, the more popular the team, and the more successful the company. This thinking, however, devalues the individual and tends to make him or her replaceable. Essentially, if one soldier dies in battle, another will take his place. If one person leaves the organization, someone else can be hired to take her job. However, this thinking is contrary to Jewish thought. Frankly, it's dangerous too. Jewish tradition reminds us again and again that we are each capable of remarkable things, and each of us matters. Consider the opening words of Genesis when God creates human beings. God creates each person b'tselem Elohim, in the divine image, entrusting every human to hold sway over all of the earth. Pay attention, God warns the first humans, for we each possess the ability to both care and corrupt. This warning to Adam and Eve, and in turn to each of us today, is necessary because we are powerful and our individual behaviors have consequences. As the Talmud teaches, whoever saves a single life is considered by Scripture to have saved the entire world. Because we are created in God's image, each of us possessing that holy soul carefully implanted within us by our Creator, and we are each tasked to serve as God's partners in the daily unfolding of creation. In so doing, teaches Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, we are in concert with the divine plan, fulfilling our purpose for existing in the world. Not only is the human being created for this purpose, but rest assured, we are also given the ability and the capacity to attain this supreme goal. Indeed, each of us has the power to change the world, but here's a second problem with this message. Change-making is often scary and hard. It's easier to follow the crowd or look away from injustice in order to go about our regular, relatively comfortable lives. Like Queen Esther wrote in her email to me this week, saving my community wasn't a party. I had to overcome fear and find strength. In the Megillah, Esther's story, her uncle Mordecai warns of the dangers of keeping silent in the face of Haman's evil plot to get rid of all the Jews. Certainly, that option was available to her, to do nothing. But Mordecai warns, if you remain silent at this time, relief and rescue may come to the Jews from some other place, but you and your lineage will perish. And who knows, he says, perhaps it was precisely for a moment like this, in Hebrew 8 kazot, that you have attained royal standing. Essentially, you were born for this work, Esther. You were put here on earth to be a change maker. That's the same message Joanne Bland told our group of civil rights journey participants when we met with Joanne in Selma, Alabama 2 Shabbats ago. Look to Barbara, who was with us, Lorelei, who's been on a previous trip. At only 9 years old, Joanne trained with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, what they called SNCC, joining with other children and teens in the civil rights movement. By 11 years old, Joanne had been arrested 13 times. On the front lines of the struggle, the young Bland marched on Bloody Sunday, on Turnaround Tuesday, and the first leg of the successful march from Selma to Montgomery. Today, Ms. Bland shares her eyewitness accounts of history with groups like ours, inspiring generation of history makers. Joanne told us that she is just an ordinary individual, though. Ordinary, she said. That was a common mantra among the movement's leaders. Diane Nash, whose leadership helped to found SNCC, once remarked, history books mistakenly portray the civil rights movement as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s movement, but it was a people's movement. Many thousands participated. If young people think of it as King's movement, they'll wait for a leader. But if they understand that it was ordinary people who did it, they can ask themselves, what can I do? By design, the civil rights movement was a movement of ordinary individuals doing remarkable work, one step, one letter, one day at a time, to cause enormous change. Another hero that our group met with in Alabama is Bishop Calvin Woods, who, standing in Birmingham's Freedom Park, taught us some of the songs of the civil rights movement. These spirituals motivated freedom fighters like Joanne and Bishop Woods to continue, despite the terror and the hate that they faced. I can't stop thinking about one particular song that resonates from Bishop Woods' 90-year-old body like prayer. What do we want? He shouts. Freedom, justice. When do we want it? Now, they said. The bishop's song perfectly aligns with our text from the Megillah. As Mordecai warns Esther, if you remain silent at this time, relief and rescue may come from some other place, but you and your lineage will perish. In other words, you have no choice but to act. And who knows, Mordecai continues, perhaps it was precisely for a moment like this that you have attained royal standing. In a letter to his congregation this week after returning from the border between Ukraine and Poland, my mentor, Rabbi Jonathan Blake, droshed on that very verse from the book of Esther. Sobering words to consider as Ukraine resists Putin's aggression. The Purim story reminds us that it is always 8 kazot, a moment like this, the present moment, the moment when we choose not to remain silent, but to speak and to act in the name of justice. It must be for a moment like this, Rabbi Blake reflects, that we recognize our own power to make a difference, even in small ways, even when we feel helpless, even when our hearts are breaking. We each possess enormous power, even more than we give ourselves credit for most of the time. Power to make the world a better place. But as our tradition frequently reminds us, and as so many have modeled throughout our history, tikkun olam, seeking justice, comes when individuals recognize their power and decide to act in the world with however much money, strength, or power is available to them at that moment. Eight kazod, now. And as Esther explained in the email she sent me this week, Jewish tradition demands nothing less. Shabbat shalom.